Baseball has always been a patient game. It gives you time to look around, time to notice the shadows creeping across the infield, time to wonder whether the pitcher still has something left or whether everyone in the ballpark knows the manager is one batter late. On paper, the game looks tidy enough. 9 innings, 27 outs, a lineup card, a box score waiting to be filled. But baseball has never been as neat as the paper it gets printed on. The real game lives in the turn nobody saw coming, the harmless inning that suddenly gets loud, the routine grounder that should have ended things but doesn't, the quiet decision in the sixth that becomes the headline by the ninth. That is the unwritten script of baseball. No one knows who gets the big at bat until the game decides to hand it to him. No one knows which pitch will matter until it is already on its way to the plate. And that is what a good tabletop baseball game has to find. Not just the averages, not just the names on the cards, not just a believable final score. It has to find that feeling, the sense that something is unfolding in front of you, one pitch, one roll, one choice at a time. Because the best games do not simply recreate baseball, they give the game room to write itself. This is the Tabletop SportCast. Welcome to the Tabletop SportCast, where we talk about tabletop sports through interviews, game reviews, and projects. Because the best stories aren't just told, they're played. I'm your host, James Cast, and this is episode 257. Today we are sitting down with Ian Brooke, the creator of On Deck Baseball. I'm going to take you to the interview in just a minute or so, but just to set the table about On Deck Baseball, there is a lot of baseball games, as we all know, and they all offer something just a little different. Sometimes you'll get some of the mechanics to be dialed in a little differently. Maybe the stolen base system is a little different. Maybe the pitcher fatigue system is a little different. Maybe it's more full play or an express game. There's so many variants out there. And one of the things that I like to do is sit down with designers and figure out what was the thing they were chasing as they designed their game. So that's really the angle we're going to have today as we sit down with Ian, is to talk and introduce you to On Deck Baseball. And for those who have already been introduced, I'm hoping you'll just get a little peek behind the curtain and get a better feel for what the design influence was from the designer himself. Because that's what it's all about with baseball. How much of that narrative are you looking for in a particular game? All baseball games have some level of abstraction that they are going to introduce. In some cases, it's very high. You may be just rolling for something like a final score or the total runs that are being scored. Other times, you're going to have something that's fully immersed. You're going to be checking a lot of different ratings to see what the fielders are doing, what the base runners are doing, what the pitchers are doing, what the batters are doing. And dialing in and dialing out from all that is usually where we get the uniqueness for each of these different baseball games that are out there in our marketplace. So as we sit down with Ian, that's really what we're going for, is to get a better feel for the type of game he was looking for, that he wanted to design. And as always, design first and foremost for himself. He made a game that he found enjoyable and then found an audience for that game after the fact. So we're going to skip all the around the table today. We're going to skip a lot of the news from around the hobby. We'll probably get into more of that next week. But for now, let's get over to the interview that I recorded this week with Ian Brooke. All right, I am sitting down tonight with Ian Brooke, and Ian is the designer of On Deck Baseball, and we're going to spend a good amount of time tonight just talking about the game that he has designed. Ian, it is great to see you again.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm really excited to kind of sit down, talk to you about On Deck Baseball. I know we've been at Digital to Dice Con
We have.
together the last couple of years, but we really didn't get a chance to sit down and talk too much about your game. Although I noticed both years your table was busy, so that was good.
Yeah, it's been an exciting couple of years at the con. I've definitely enjoyed it. I mentioned earlier that I drove up from Florida, so it's a long trip, but it's been worth it both years, and I hope to continue doing it as long as I can. So
Very cool.
hopefully the
And I
car
know
can
I
keep
get
going.
Mike and Dave make fun of me all the time, but at least last year I was one of the many prizes I walked away with was yours. So
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah,
so that was cool.
yeah. They made the James Cast rule for the the door prizes this year. I thought that was great.
That was fun, and actually added a lot to it, didn't it? It was a
Yeah, I
fun way to
loved it. The
do it.
rolling of the dice, I made it a lot of fun. Yeah,
It
it was
sure
fun
did,
following that.
especially with being right next to Mohegan Sun and everything. I was like, this is a perfect way to like kind of
Oh
play up
yeah,
the whole
yeah,
angle of like the area we're in. So smart move on their part.
yeah. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So let's kind of start off with like your origin story with On Deck Baseball. Like, what was the original spark for the game, and what were you kind of hoping to have the baseball experience feel like at the table?
So my story starts, and I think a lot of designer stories starts when they were children, right? They played these games. I didn't play a lot of them, and I'll get into that later. Like I didn't really know that this many games existed at the time, and of course, Strat was the big one. So when I was playing these games back when I was a kid, a buddy of mine, we were rummaging around somewhere and we found I think it was a 1984 set for Stratomatic.
Mhm.
And we're talking like this is the early 90s. So this was already an old set to me. So we took out the set, we started trying to play it. We didn't really use a lot of charts. We didn't do like we just rolled dice and we were looking for outcomes. But we had a lot of fun with it, and we even took it to the town pool. I can remember one time my other buddy and I actually took a trip with my dad and my brother up to Cooperstown to the Hall of Fame, and we were rolling Stratomatic games in the station wagon, laying down in the back. So I mean, this was it was Stratomatic. It's kind of like where everybody starts, and this was kind of like the beginning for me. But moving forward, I also kind of deviated from wanting I didn't really want the historical side of it. So we started creating our own players for it. And we
Mhm.
started kind of deviating from the Stratomatic tone of the game, I guess you could say. We started creating our own players, and it was a very basic type of thing. We would have, the two columns on the pitcher or batter. We would have still the cards we would flip over to see where it was, the classic 50-50 system, and it would be numbered, to 12, and we would get the results. But it was a very basic system, rudimentary at best. Um, and then of course, junior high, high school hits, you stop playing these games, right? I mean, it's kind of like
Yep.
that, the dark ages, like they say. I'm also a Lego fiend, and they say it's the dark ages. When you stop playing with these games, you go off to high school, college, and then eventually you come back to it.
Mhm.
So I went to college in upstate New York. I ended up losing a baseball scholarship because due to injuries. School was, I had pretty decent GPA, not great, but that's not why I lost the scholarship. And I ended up moving down to Florida because my parents retired to Florida, so I came back down here. Um, After a while, I just kind of got I wanted to create something and I wanted to play something for myself. Video games started getting even more complicated, but that's kind of where I was at. I was playing the Maddens, I was playing triple play baseball, all these different games that were on there. And I started working at a local grocery store called Winn Dixie, and
Mhm.
I worked at the pharmacy. And I just got an idea to just start creating a game. And I didn't even know that all these games existed. This is not a community that I was a part of. I didn't go out, searching for games. I ended up just creating a game because I wanted to create a game and I wanted something for myself to play. I thought that the best way to represent the statistics would be by using a base 10 system. So that's when I came up with the matrix, because you have 100 results. You could figure about 500 at bats per a player, and you could see on the card how many results, and that would, play out for a season, typically. Um, so I kind of went in that direction because I remembered back to Stratomatic. I couldn't figure out how many home runs this guy was supposed to hit over the long season. It's kind of hard to decipher those cards for good reason. They all have their algorithms and their logistics that they have to go through creating these
Yeah.
cards. So I just wanted to create something myself, and when I started doing that, I wanted to create something that was really with the flow of baseball. I played baseball all the way through college, and I wanted it to represent the more of the on-field interactions that the game represents when you're actually playing a game, and somehow translate that into dice. And
Mm.
that's really just kind of where it all started. And you could tell, like, in the game itself, a lot of those mechanics are based on player-to-player interactions. The double play mechanic, the pitcher batter interact with the confrontation role. All this kind of stuff played into my game design. I kind of went through probably like it must be like a 10-year process, just
Mm.
dialing down different mechanics, seeing what played best, what didn't work, and just like trial and error, my own test leagues. I have probably 3 crates filled with binders for, all kinds of different teams. And it was all fictional, by the way. This is not historical. I was doing all fictional
Okay.
stuff. And then eventually I started working in restaurants, and I met up with one of my good buddies, Adam. He was a baseball enthusiast. He was a board game enthusiast. I went over there to play Axis and Allies one time to his house. And I was like, hey, why don't you check out this game that I'm working on? It's baseball. I know you like baseball. So, maybe we'll get into this. And this is not the version that I've released now. This is a previous version. Sat down to the table. We played a couple of games. He was really into it. We ended up making a league out of it. And
Mm.
we played a 100-game season for season 1. He won the championship. And let me make this clear. I've never won a championship in my own game. I want to be perfectly clear with that, because I've had a lot of leagues. We have a face-to-face league here going into season 3, and I've never won. Anyway, going off on a tangent on that. Adam and I played for a very long time, and then you fast forward to COVID, and him and my wife kind of tag teamed me and told me that I should try and release this game. Again, I didn't know that this community existed. I didn't know that there were, hundreds, thousands of different baseball games. So I
Mm.
didn't know if mine was original compared to everybody else's. I figured it was, because, I came up with it really with, a blank slate. I wasn't basing it off of other games that were out there. So I ended up figuring out that I could, build my own website. A lot of that was trial and error, putting it all together, and then eventually releasing the game in 2021. I ended up releasing it. And a lot of it, I have to give a lot of thanks to my wife, because she became a very popular food blogger and allowed me to retire from the restaurant business. And that actually helped a
Okay.
lot, because I had to consume my time somehow aside, outside of the kids and everything else. So thankful for her, I've been able to release that game. But yeah, basically, I just wanted to get the on-field interactions to the tabletop, and that was really my basis for creating the game. And
Very
that's
good.
kind of the story that kind of leads us to where we are now. Started out fictional, and eventually, the call came to go historical, and I had to do a little bit of fine tuning to get that right. But eventually, release some historical sets, and it's been overwhelmingly popular, more than I could imagine. Of course, I'm not Strat, I'm not APPA, I'm not all these big game companies. But for me,
Right.
it keeps me busy, and I'm, in the office printing out sets on my own. I don't have a printer that does it for me. The only thing that I have, third party, is my boxes, and I do everything out of my office. So it keeps me busy.
Very good.
Yeah.
So really, I guess the only familiarity you had with the hobby pretty much was Strat. Were you aware of games like Appa or like Status Pro at that point in
I
time, or?
wasn't, and the only other
Okay.
game that I actually played was, and I don't recall the name of it. I know that there are a couple of Facebook pages for it. It was the circle cards, and it had like the spinner,
Oh
and
yeah.
you like spin it, and then you get the result. Which, and nothing against anybody who likes that game, but that just doesn't compute with me. I don't like,
Mm.
you land on a line. What are you supposed to do? Um, it's just not for me. I prefer rolling dice, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, I played that. And then when I first moved down to Florida, there was another game that I tried out. And the only reason I really tried it out is because I collected baseball cards
Okay.
when I was a kid. And this game was released in packs. And that was MLB Showdown, I think it was called.
Oh yeah.
And it was they had a football game also called Red Zone Football, I want to say. So I played those, a little bit. I probably collected the cards more than I actually played the game.
Yeah.
Because they had some cool refractor cards and shiny things and stuff. So
Okay.
that was basically where I went. Oh, and I do want to double back a little bit. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that, about my game was that you could kind of attach yourself to the players. And this is going along the lines of the fictional aspect of it. So that's when I thought that I should have an image of the players on the cards. And that's where that came from. So I try to make it every single image distinct. And, the earlier versions that never were released, they had very generic images on it, but they were vector art. So I was able to change the colors. I had different positions.
Mm.
Some looked like better batters than others. Some looked like weaker pitchers, that kind of thing. But having the artwork and the images on the card were very important to me. And it was a priority for me to look at the game and know that if I saw it on the shelf, I would buy it. So
Yeah.
it's really like, that's one of those things to where it's a priority that I want to have it in my game, and I wouldn't come back off of that, I guess. I don't know if
Okay.
that makes sense or not, but
It
so,
does.
so that's,
Yeah.
that's where I was with that.
And you mentioned a little bit like with the MLB showdown. Were you like a like baseball card collector for a while too? Like, was
Oh
that something
man.
that,
Yeah, myself, my dad, my brother, we all collect cards.
okay.
Um, my brother's house has 3 closets that are filled with baseball cards.
Wow.
And my dad, he said he didn't start collecting until he had kids, but when he was a kid, he said he had like 7 Mickey Mantle rookie cards, and his mom like threw them all out. Of course, that's the story you hear.
Sure.
But unfortunately for me, I collected in the '80s, and all it's a lot of cardboard now. They're not worth a lot because of they produce so much of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I have tons of baseball cards, tons.
Okay.
So
So did that help with the design of like your player cards a little bit? Was like trying
yeah,
to
I
get
think
that feel?
because you grow attached to those cards and you see those images, and I think that's probably where it stemmed. Where I wanted the cards to have the image of the player. I wanted you to be able to attach yourself. I wanted you, especially for the fictional stuff, I wanted you to be able to dictate that player's personality.
Yeah.
And as you're playing this fictional game, and I could tell you, like, from my standpoint, and there's a lot of people that play my game that tell me the same thing. There are players that I hate. There's players that I see coming up to the plate that I just despise. One guy, his name is Joe Glenn for the Phantoms. I can't stand the guy. I don't know why. I just don't like him. There's players that I really like. Peter Lucas, Joe Garland. Like, there's these guys that, spinning off the top of my head, thinking about my own fictional league that I love to see come up to the plate for the action. There's others that I just, wish weren't in the box. And I don't
Nice.
have a mechanic for just intentionally hitting a batter, but, there are some players that I wish I did. So,
That's funny. Yeah, and I think you mentioned that you didn't really know about the hobby and the community as much. But I feel like that's one of the things that does kind of make your game really unique in the hobby. And I'm sure now you're much more familiar with a lot of the games that are out
oh yeah,
there.
yeah, definitely.
That idea of having the player image is something that makes your game stand out from the crowd. Do you think that's true?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's part of it. I also think if you look at the way my cards results are represented, I think it looks very different from other games in the
Yeah.
community. For better or worse, some people get with it. Some people don't like the representation, and that's fine. I also, one thing that was a priority for me, also I remembered back from the Stratomatic days when I was a kid, seeing all these charts and not knowing what to do with them. So one of my priorities was to not have external charts. So you could actually play about 97% of the game of on deck baseball on the player cards themselves. I do have some like special situation charts that you have to go to for rare play events and stuff like that. But most of the game, like I said, 97% is going to be played right off the cards themselves. And I think that's a lot different also. That does increase the size of the cards. But at the same time,
Right.
also people are driven and attracted to the fact that they're color coded results. The results are a little bit bigger in the box. So, our demographic is aging, it is. And
Hmm.
it's easier to see. It's easier on the eyes to read the cards, but it also allows all the charts to be on the back of the cards, which, yeah, they take up a little bit more space on your table, but you don't have a giant chart on your table that's taking up the rest of the table. You can sit
Yeah.
comfortably with something to eat. When we're doing face-to-face league here, we'll have, 8 guys playing on my dining room table, and you have plenty of room, and you're just playing off the cards. You don't have to worry about charts. And I think that's a big part. That was definitely a priority when I started out.
Yeah, I think you got that right because you're totally right. I mean, they are bigger player cards, but there's no other charts around. So when I sit down and play the game, I pretty much alternate between 2 stacks of cards, pitchers,
Yeah,
batters, right? And I just have the 2 sets in front of me, and I just rotate. Okay, end of the inning, move the pitchers in, move the
exactly.
batters
Yeah.
out, and I've got the charts right in front of me. And to your point, like things like stolen bases, error checks, like all that stuff just is already there on the cards, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just roll it off and you can play a game, people are telling me that they can get a game done within 35 to 40 minutes, which is, I think, pretty quick for, these types of games. I can roll
Yeah,
off a game, I've been playing for 15 years. I can roll off a game in 25, 30 minutes sometimes.
sure.
But without having to go to external charts, it allows you that speed because everything is right in front of you.
Yeah. And the fact that you started on fictional, probably, we always talk a lot about fictional versus historical and setting expectations, right? When you go the historical route, you have to set the expectations of it, better recreate the statistical accuracy of those
Yes. Yeah.
players. But when you start with fictional, I think to your point, you get to really dial in the feel of the game a little bit more. And, you mentioned like you were playing baseball a lot. So that probably gave you a better feel for it. These things need to show up the right way in the game. And so,
Exactly. Yeah. It allowed me to create a game that I felt had the flow of baseball. And one of the reasons why I named the game On Deck is because, I wanted it to feel like you were in the on deck circle, witnessing the game from a field point of view. You weren't just in the stands, you weren't just rolling dice and getting results, but you actually were in the flow of the game. And that was a big part of it.
nice. So, what is it when someone sits down to on deck baseball for the first time? What is that thing that you kind of hope that they'll notice right away about the flow of the game?
I'm hoping that, and regardless of whether it's the fictional or the historical, I'm hoping that they see that the flow of the game leads to the story of the game, right? Because, I mean,
Mhm.
there's a story in every single half inning. There's a story in every inning. There's a story in every 3 innings for a third of the game. And it continues all the way through to the end. And I'm hoping that they sit down and it's not a chore. First of all, I hope it's definitely not a chore if they're sitting down and playing a game, because if it gets to that point, then you're playing the wrong game. But I'm hoping that the story plays out in front of them as they're feeling like they're part of it. And the flow is very important to that, because if you get stuck on the flow of a game, that takes you out of the element. It takes you out of that game. So I'm really hoping
Mhm.
that when a person first sits down, and there is a learning curve, because my game, like I said, it's very original. It's very different from other games. But once you get
Yeah.
past that learning curve and you get, you know, to a point where you're comfortable playing the game, you're comfortable rolling the dice, I want that flow to suck you into the game, essentially, because I want the confrontation of the pitcher and the batter to tell you the story of the at bat. Then when that batter hits the ball and you're turning a double play, I want the story of the shortstop, feeding it off to the second baseman who's at the turn at second base and then throwing over to the first baseman. Like, it all tells a story, and I want that flow to go from point A to point B to point C very easily, and telling a story as it does it. And I think that's the biggest part of my game. And I know, every designer says the same thing, right? I mean, they all want their game to tell a story. I just felt
Sure.
like I took a different approach from it. And again, I started with a clean slate, a blank slate, not knowing what other games did. But comparing my game to other games now, I did take a different approach to it. And you're getting those interactions. And while things are built into the game that you're not necessarily thinking about, it's all playing
Mhm.
out in front of you on the tabletop, and you're seeing these results. And hopefully, like I said, you're getting sucked into the story, because that's really what
Mhm.
it is here. We're storytellers, right? You're playing a game, you're rolling the dice, whether it's fictional or historical, you're telling a story of what happened on that day on your tabletop on the baseball field. And that's where I'm hoping that the flow will take you and accomplish that for you. And I think it does a good job. I mean, look, when I was at the con, I had a lot of people that came over to my table that never played the game before, and they walked away buying sets, sometimes multiple sets. So I must be doing something right. Right. I
I
mean,
would agree.
they're coming. Yeah. I mean, they're coming over and they're playing. And we're talking about like Joe Cards, guys that are dedicated to other companies and playing other games. And, thankfully they're willing to give my game a shot, and they're feeling that flow and they're walking away with it because it's sucking you into the game. It really is.
And I think most games are really good about, and your game does too, right? The batter pitcher interaction is at the heart of baseball, right? I
Yeah.
mean, 90% of the game happens between that relationship of the batter and the pitcher. But to your point, I think one of the things that makes your game more unique is the idea that you were touching on, that we have other relationships that are happening. And a lot of other games make those a little bit too much more of an abstract or an afterthought. And it's part of the results.
Yeah.
It's baked into the results, but you don't actually like see a double play getting turned.
Yeah.
And in your game, you do actually get to see like that event unfold, and it's a chance that Is it going to be double play? Let's find out. Like, we
Yeah.
have a couple of factors that might play into whether or not this actually rolls out the right way.
And it also builds into the strategy of it all too, because if you look at the players on your infield and you're looking at the ratings and you're looking at, the base runners and the hitter, if they're super fast, you may want to get the automatic out at first. And you're thinking like that person on the field in real life, if the shortstop is not Ozzie Smith, and if you're, I hate to say I'm a Yankee fan, but if it's Anthony Volpe at shortstop, you may just get the out at first. You may not want to turn to double play. You may want to do that. So the strategy plays into it. And then, other games, yeah, it's baked into the system, but I wanted the person to be able to feel that in the flow. And thankfully I was able to do it without taking away too much time for the resolution and the result to come, because you're still able to accomplish the entire game within 45 minutes, which, playing out the double plays each time it happens, you would think it'd be a lengthy process, but it gets the job done.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. So when we balance the idea of realism, detail, pace of play, like how did you decide where On Deck Baseball should kind of land on that spectrum?
Well, like you said, it's a balancing act, right? You want the pace of play to get you within a certain amount of time, because let's face it, if you're playing an hour and a half game on the tabletop, that's a little too long. Some people grow bored of that, and this is an age of results, right? Everybody wants to see results quick. Well,
Sure.
I feel like 45 minutes to 55 minutes is kind of like where you want to be. And if it starts going longer than that, you're pretty much done with it. So it was for me, when I started creating the game, again, not knowing how these other games played out, for me, I was younger. I didn't have, a family at that time, as I was fine tuning this game, I was growing up and I was getting a family. I got married. I got kids. So it started turning into like, I don't have a lot of time to play this game. Right.
Right.
So I got to be able to roll this game, and I got to change a diaper soon because this kid's going to pop, just whatever it is. So as I was going through the process of, trial and error with all these different seasons and different leagues that I had, I was fine tuning as I was going, and I didn't want to sacrifice quality. That was a big part of it. So as I'm fine tuning it, I was also figuring out different ways that I can combat systems that just didn't work. On paper, it looked great. On the dice, on the table, it just didn't. And there were a lot of revisions that I had to go through. One of the biggest revisions, I think, from the earlier stages, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with pace of play, but more quality of play. Originally, I only had a rating system of 3. So it was either like 1 was terrible, 2 was, good or average, and then 3 was great. I had to expand that, right? Because it's a bigger arc than that. It's not just 3 stages of a person's ability. So I now have a rating system from 1 to 5, which I think works out really well. I think also on the front of the cards, there's some ratings that actually play against each other. So that's built into the system, but like stamina and endurance for pitcher's fatigue, like those, play off of each other for the fatigue chart in the back. But also your stamina also dictates your max innings you can go before you have to start rolling on the chart. So there's multiple uses for different ratings. So even though they're rated from 1 to 5, sometimes you have to take into account the ratings around them also to really feel for a player. But yeah, the pace of play and the quality, they go hand in hand, because you don't want to sacrifice one without the other. So it's a balancing act. And I think that when I was finally prepared to release the game, I was comfortable with the fact that I was able to play a game with a new person between 40 and 45 minutes, and no quality was sacrificed. And I think when I finally got to that stage, because like I said, I didn't think about releasing it until COVID in 2020. I didn't release it until the middle of 2021. And that's when I knew I was comfortable with it. And it did take me a while to write the instruction booklet. God, that took a while. Teaching somebody else through words, because you have to write an instruction booklet, not only just to tell a person how to play a game, but they might not necessarily know all the terminology for baseball. So it's like also making sure that they understand what all these results mean. So that was a lot. That was probably the hardest part of the entire process, was writing the instruction booklet. I
think writing good instructions is a difficult task, and especially when you get used to being able to walk somebody through a game, and now you can't do that. You have to rely on them to be able to just take the instructions you've given and walk themselves through the game, and that's a much different, aspect. Obviously, things like YouTube make it a little easier to start, for designers now to like share, like, hey, let me
like
walk
I
you
have
through the
tons of
game
tutorial
and stuff.
videos that people can check out, because it's, everybody learns differently, but visually is like the easiest way, because you actually see the dice roll and you see the results. I can kind of explain it a little better because I could tell when I'm right and I get tied up in words. I mean, it kind of happens to me too with like live video. But you know, it was hard, right? It was, I think,
Mm.
thinking back on it now, like that was the most difficult part was getting that translated from the game to the paper it was hard.
So as you created like your original like fictional leagues and everything, did you find that you were were you modeling it after a historical season, or were you more going for like almost like prototypes, player template, kind of like I need a big slugger, I need a good defensive specialist, or was it really like let me take like guys from the 76 season and just make them fictional guys, or what was your approach typically?
So, that's a great question because it actually leads to another point in my life that I didn't even think to include in this whole thing. When I moved down to Florida, I ended up going to UNF, University of North Florida, and I took a baseball history course. Of course, it's the best college course I ever took in my life, right? But it was taught by somebody from the Saber Society.
Okay.
He was a member of it, and obviously we know in this community that these people are all about statistics and they can talk your head off in a good way about everything having to do with baseball.
Yeah.
So during that course, of course, I got an A. I mean, why wouldn't I? I was talking to my professor, and for the life of me, I cannot remember his name now, and I feel really bad. But this is like 15 years ago, so actually, it's longer than 15 years ago, probably 20 years ago. But talking to him, I was telling him that I was, kind of creating this thing on my own, and he seemed very interested, and he probably knew about other games, even though he didn't say it to me. I wish he would have, because that would have kind of enlightened me a little bit as what's going on in the community. But we were talking back and forth, and he was like, "Well, so your game is fictional, but how do you want the stats to play out? Because different eras of baseball are very different. You're going from the dead ball era, not a lot of power. You're going, to the golden age in the 50s, and you're getting more power. You're going to the 60s where it's pitching, to the 80s, the 90s, all of that." And I was like, "Well, I grew up in the 80s, and I really liked seeing that the league leaders were sometimes, 30, maybe 40 home runs and home runs. Um, but I also like the fact that the strategy also came in with relief pitchers in the early 90s. So if I had to reflect on anything that I created in my fictional game, I would say that the offense is kind of geared towards the 80s and the
Mm.
pitching is kind of geared towards the 90s. It's kind of like a smash between the two. You're going to get your home run hitters. You're going to get the guys that are going to have 30 to 40, you hope maybe 50 home runs, but you're also going to have those pitchers that are still getting complete games, but you're going to have times where you're going to have to go to the pen. And with the fictional part, and I will say this, that my fictional game is way deeper than the historical game will ever
Oh,
be.
okay.
The fictional game is definitely my baby, and I built it in such a manner where you immerse yourself in your own universe. So you're actually taking kind of like an RPG, a role playing game kind of stance on it. You're the GM, you're the manager, you're the bullpen coach, like you're everything. And managing the pitching staff can be very challenging depending on what difficulty you're playing the game on. And that was a big part of me, wanting the game to emulate a little bit of like that 90s era. The 80s era, yeah, I wanted the power, I wanted the stolen bases, I wanted the defense, because I feel like that was a very even keel for offense in the 80s. And
Yeah.
then when the 90s came in, I wanted you to have to manage your bullpen. So it all kind of came together, and it all stemmed from my professor at UNF asking me that question. And I thank you for asking me that, because I didn't even think about that, and I probably haven't thought about him in years. But yeah, that he was a very big part of this entire process, definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I love talking about game mechanics. When you look at your game, what mechanic in the game do you think best represents like your design philosophy? Like, is there that one part that you would say, if I asked you the question, like, what's on deck baseball all about? Like, is there one mechanic that kind of stands out for you?
um, it's hard to bring that down to one singular mechanic. There's two that I'm very proud of, but I think that two of them play off of each other very well, and that's the confrontation role. And I'm not just talking about the pitcher batter interaction, because the confrontation role actually plays out through the entire game.
Mm.
You can, if you hit a line drive and you have a man on second base, you do a confrontation roll to see if that runner got doubled up. If the second baseman was close enough to touch the base, and then he's out. So the confrontation role plays throughout the entire game. So I like it that it's incorporated into the entire game and plays out into different results. The fatigue system is probably my most celebrated mechanic. The people that play my game, they always comment on how the fatigue system is different from anything else that they've played for or played with. It makes you manage the pitchers a little bit differently. It makes you think about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But the reason I say both of them is because the confrontation role is dictated sometimes by the fatigue mechanic. Because as you're playing this game, your pitchers will tire. And as your pitchers tire, you're rolling on that fatigue chart. And if it hits your pitching abilities, that's going to affect the outcome of your confrontation rolls on the pitcher batter interaction. So those two things play very well together, and it's the biggest part of the game because that's where you kick off all the action. So if I had to say picking one thing, and I know it's not picking one thing, but if I had to say it would be the interaction between the confrontation rolls and the fatigue system.
Do you find that those two systems provide a lot of variability? And I ask that in the sense that, and as someone who played baseball, like to me, more than any other sport, baseball is all about the ebbs and flows of performance, right?
Oh yeah,
There's just, I can look at a basketball season and I feel like consistently guys are pretty close to what they do on a night in, night out basis. There's obviously variability in points scored and
sure,
rebounds, but for the most part, the guys who are rebounders are going to rebound. But in baseball, it's like I can go 2 weeks without hitting a home run, even if I'm a big time home run hitter,
of course, yeah.
Do you find that that allows for that variability to play out a little bit more?
Oh yeah, because built into my fatigue system, if your pitcher is on a roll, I have a poise chart. And if he's first of all, if he strikes out the side, you're getting an automatic added onto the ability for the confrontation roll, which makes it harder for the batter to win the result. If
Mm.
you get through two consecutive 1, 2, 3 innings, you're rolling on, possibly getting an increase as well. And then every inning from there, consecutively, you're automatically getting an increase. So your pitcher can roll. And sometimes, my pitching abilities go from 1 to 5, but I've had guys up to a 10. Like this
Oh,
is how
wow.
guys are going to be starting to throw like no hitters. And that's a very rare occurrence. Believe me, I've had it maybe twice where I had a guy go up to a 10. But the possibility is there, and that's where that flow is. And then vice versa, you're also talking about the batter taking advantage of it if a pitcher is on a decline. So if a pitcher's having a hard time on the mound and he's getting decreases, then yeah, you're going to start favoring the batters a little bit, and then you're going to start seeing guys actually take advantage of that pitcher. So it's definitely all built into it, and it's meant to be that. Like there's not going to be a black and white, this player is going to do this at the at bat. Like it's going to flow. It's going to flow with the interactions, with what's going on in the game. And that's a part of drawing you into the game. Like you want to know how this pitcher is feeling. Well, he just gave up 3 home runs and he rolled on his poise chart. He's not feeling very good.
Yeah.
Like it's all built into there and all that plays out. And going back to earlier, what we talked about, that's all part of the story. You're building that pitcher's story. Well, he's not having a great day. You may want to take him out. Like it's all built in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of the other games, because it's so static, the performance, like even if I have like a Sandy Koufax from like 65, even if he's struggling and I'm like, man, he's giving up home runs, giving up singles, it's like, well, I'm keeping him in because he's still Sandy
Yeah,
Koufax.
because his
But
card is his card, right? I
his
mean,
card is his
you're
card.
not
But
taking out Sandy Koufax. I mean, depending
no,
on which Dodgers, you don't have, you have a pen, but not Sandy Koufax in a pen.
no.
So yeah, and I feel like that's where the historical version of my game comes into play because yeah, you could have Koufax on the mound. Koufax has bad days. I mean, he didn't
Yes.
have many of them,
No.
but he did have some bad days. Like it happens.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a inherent part of the game.
So as you made the shift from fictional to historical, right? Did you find that the game was already dialed in well enough, or did that start to lead to other iterations? You mentioned that you maybe went from like 3 ratings to 5 ratings. Did that start to come into play because you were moving towards the historical seasons and
No,
wanting
so
to
the
do
the
that?
ratings change came about way before I even released the
Okay.
game. So every single version I've had released has always been 1 to 5. I would say that the fictional version gave me a great base to work on to get historical.
Okay.
I realized that I had to make some changes because different eras of the game were played differently.
Mhm.
So I had to make it so that uh, it's hard for me to explain because I really like the narrative of fictional, but I wanted historical to be as accurate as possible. So trying to get, my mind wrapped around of the replay type of it was kind of difficult for me. But
Yeah.
luckily baseball reference is there. So, you don't have to worry about, figuring out how a player played throughout his career. You can look all this stuff up now. So there were some refinements that had to be made to the cards. You can actually play the fictional along with the historical cards, and a lot of people have done that. There are some leagues out there that are draft leagues that draft from both. But there are some mechanics that are included in the historical version of the game that's not included in the fictional. Thinking back on it, there are a couple of those mechanics that I wish I had incorporated into the fictional, because there's like a mechanic talking about whether or not the batter hit the ball into the gap, and if the fielder in the outfield could get to the ball, or it fell in for a hit. And basically it's a confrontation roll. Again, the confrontation roll coming into this between the batter's gap rating and the fielder's fielding rating. So, you play off of that to see if the batter can get an extra base hit off of it, get an extra base, or actually just even get a hit, because it flows off of a fly out result. So if the fielder makes a play, then obviously is out. So there were a lot of things that came into the historical version that were not in fictional, and that was, for all intents and purposes, to get the game historically accurate. So it took some refinement, and it probably took me. I had been working on a historical version of the game probably for about a year and a half before I ever announced it, because I knew that the popularity of the fictional game, as it was getting out there more and more and more, I was getting asked more and more and more about when I was going to put out a historical version. I was like, it might be on the table. I'm not really sure, because I didn't want to put anything out if I wasn't confident in the fact that it could reflect on historical accuracy. And eventually, when I got it to that point, then I was able to release it, and I made the announcement. And that was a big step. That was only 3 years ago. I mean, I had the game out for 2 years before I made the jump to historical. Probably only 2.5 years ago, really.
Wow.
So,
games like Strat and APA, because of all the abstraction that they do and the fact that they don't get into some of the details of, like, how the defense executes a double play and things like that, allows them to be very close statistical accuracy, and they can get like pretty much like to the button, right? Like,
yeah.
what you're going to recreate in terms of the numbers that the pitchers and the batters are going to have. Given the depth of the interactions that you have in your game, do you still feel like you're going to deliver that same type of statistical reality, or do you feel like what people playing your game will get is, it feels like Ted Williams, it feels like Andrew Jones in the outfield, like it feels like, Ozzie Smith and like Vince Coleman? Or do you feel like, no, you're going to have those guys do exactly what they did in real life?
So when I released the game, I released it in best of the best sets, which is cross era sets, and I try to release a team from every decade in it. Well, not every decade, but like 8 teams all from a different decade in the same set. So that's cross era. So it's difficult to judge a game's accuracy when you're playing cross era, right? But because I made those refinements, I knew that the players would be accurate to their years. So you can't really tell that by playing, the 1917 White Sox against the 1968 Cardinals. But when I released the 1961 full season set, that was very different. And we had a project, and I actually printed out the results. I wasn't sure if we were going to get to it, but I have results for it. When we got together and we decided to do a replay, I got 10 different people, not including, 11 including myself, to replay the entire 1961 New York Yankees season to see how close we can get the M&M boys. And for me, this was, on the onset, very unnerving. You think you have everything right until you put it into 10 different people's hands who play different styles, even with your game, because you could play it different ways, and you don't know the results you're going to get. And I'm posting these results, not knowing how it's going to end up. Boy, was I shocked about how these results came back. And I know you can't, it's only audio, but I have the statistics here. So, okay. So I'm going to, first of all, right off the bat, I'm going to go with the M&M boys, right? Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, it was their season, 1961. So we were a little short. We didn't hit it right on the nose.
Okay.
But look, when you're talking about 162 games, you also have to consider the fact that my game is built in to have a fatigue system. So we were playing completely fresh pitchers, which in real life, that doesn't happen. No. Okay. So you're talking about Mickey Mantle sometimes going up against a guy who pitched 3 days ago. And look, they may not release it, especially back then. They didn't have all this media. The guy had a sore arm. Okay. He's not throwing 100% the entire time. So we have to consider that. Okay.
Right.
So historically, Mickey Mantle had 54 home runs. In the replay, he had 48. That's only 6 off the pace. All
Nice.
right. He batted 317 historically. He batted 332 for my replay, so he was a little bit higher there. But his on base percentage, 448 historical and 442 in the replay. I'd say
Wow.
that's pretty close.
Yeah.
He had 6 triples historically. He had 5 in the replay. This is one that I said I would get to Roger Maris. Let me find Roger Maris, and I'll get to him next. All right, Roger Maris. He had 61, obviously, in 1961, 61 home runs. In the replay, he hit 58 home runs, 3 off the
Wow.
base. He had a batting average historically of 269. In the replay, 266, 0.003 points off. On
Wow.
base percentage was a little bit different. Historically, it was 372 in my replay, or our replay, because it's community replay. It was 345. And then slugging, because he had the 3 extra home runs, it was a little bit higher historically than it was a replay. Going to Johnny Blanchard. This is the one that gets me, okay? Johnny Blanchard in historical season 1961 had 74 hits. In the replay, 73. 1 off.
Wow.
In at-bats, historically, 243. Replay, 244. 1 off. Home runs, 21 historically. Replay, 21. Right on the dot. In runs scored, 38 historically. Replay, 35. Like, even runs scored, and that depends on the batters that are around him, not even him.
Absolutely.
Batting average, historically, batted 305. In the replay, 299. So only 6 points off. And then slugging percentage, 613 historically, in the replay, 590. So you're only talking 23 points off. Another guy, and I don't want to dive too much in, but another guy, Yogi Berra, had 11 doubles historically, 11 in the replay. 18 home runs in the replay, 22 historically. He batted 271 historically, 277 in the replay. I'll do maybe one pitcher for you. I'm looking at Moose Gower, and he was really close. Okay, Whitey Ford. Historically, he had a record of 25-4. In the replay, he had a record of 23-4. So 2 wins shy. He had 11 complete games historically, 11 complete games in the replay. His ERA was a little bit better in the replay. Historically, it was 3.21. In the replay, it was 2.74. But his whip, and this to me is the biggest stat for pitchers because it's your walks and hits, divided by 9 innings. So that to me is the big one. His whip historically was 1.18. His whip in the replay was 1.16. So when I saw these results come in and I was tabulating it as I was going, as people were feeding me the results, as it was getting closer and closer to the end of the season, I was like, this is real. Like I created a game that is actually very statistically accurate. And of course that could vary from season to season, depending on how you go, but having it that close for my first, season release was, I'm still winded from it. Like I still can't believe that these results, it's funny though, because the overall record, the Yankees did get to 100 wins. I think, they had even 100 wins, but they had 109 historically. So there were 9 wins off, but there were a couple of teams that absolutely obliterated them in the replay that didn't happen in real life. And I think that's because a lot of players, they kind of play their own games, but there were some people that were playing with their favorite teams. So I don't know. You just never know.
Absolutely. No, that's really good though, because in any given replay, we always talk about the fact that real life is really just one version of the replay, right? So you never expect that you're going to get it right on the money again every single time, but when you get enough, points to hit, that tells you that it's dialed in the right way.
Yeah, I could not believe it when I saw those results.
Yeah.
And it's been a while since I've looked at those statistics before we were coming into this interview, and I was printing them out just so I could take a look at it. And honestly, I forgot how close they were, especially with Blanchard and some of these other guys. So yeah, fun stuff.
And to have 10 or 11 different people contributing to that.
That's the biggest part.
I had variability
Steve
too,
Tower
right?
was playing some games.
Yeah, I saw a couple of his.
And a lot of people, John Alexander was playing some game. Everybody who plays different styles, plays a lot of different games. They're all brought, their expertise from the tabletop dice baseball community and just rolling out games. I mean, not only were the stats accurate, but it was just a lot of fun. To actually complete that project, and we did it, within a year, after the release. To be able to do that and have that community all come together, in the On Deck group and everything, it was a lot of fun. And I
Very cool.
I am planning on releasing another season. I have a couple that I'm narrowing down. Hopefully, I'll have an announcement within a year, what I'm going to do. But I hope that we can have another replay like that. So, it was a lot
That'd
of
be
fun. I
cool.
hope to do it again.
Nice. Um, you've been talking a lot about your design process and all the iterations that you went through. What were you mentioned some of your favorite mechanics, but what was one mechanic that really evolved as you went through and went from like your paper kind of description of the game and then once you started sitting down and playing, it was like, this has to change to actually make this work. Like, what was one that really stood out to you?
I would say that would be the fatigue system with the
Okay.
pitchers. It started out very different because I couldn't figure out really how I wanted to do it.
Mm,
It started out as, if you know the back of my cards, it has a 10 by 10 matrix for the bat-in results and the pitcher card results. I had a similar matrix for the pitchers, but it was a D6. And you would roll on it and you would have to like zone in to get like to say that he was going to be going into the sixth inning without being tired, stuff like that. And, it was a good concept because it stayed with the same type of familiarity with the matrix system. So it kind of kept the same kind of scheme going, but it just didn't work.
mm,
So that one got nixed pretty early on. And then it took a lot of fine tuning as well, because I found that early on, I wasn't getting either enough complete games or pitchers weren't going deep enough in it. So that's when like the poise chart came in to play off of the fatigue chart. Like you can get an increase or you could get a decrease, what have you during the course of the game. So a lot of different mechanics probably piggybacked off of the fatigue mechanic just to get it to where I wanted it to be. And I feel like that allowed me, in the fictional game to really zone it in to where I wanted, but also going into the historical game, it allowed me to get Whitey Ford to be able to get 11 complete games during the course of a season, when originally the mechanic probably, he wouldn't have done that. So I would
mm,
say the fatigue mechanic took a lot of fine tuning to get it the way that I wanted. I knew from the onset that I wanted a matrix, a 10 by 10 system. So that was not going anywhere. That to me was perfect. It was, a little fine tuning to that, but the
yeah.
fatigue mechanic definitely took some working.
So, and I'll switch this question around a little bit, but like, because I was going to ask about your thoughts, but given all the interactions you've had with other people, especially at like Digital to Dice, like, what is the takeaway that you think people are saying to you that this is why On Deck Baseball really stands out uniquely in the crowd of like all these other sea of baseball games? Like, what is the feedback you're getting from folks that tells you like that they have found the uniqueness of On Deck Baseball?
So I would say play wise, definitely the fatigue system. I
Mm-hmm.
think people are really in tune with how that works. It's definitely different from anything else. And I think when people figure out how to, and it's a learning curve, but when people figure out how to manage it,
Yeah.
it's the thing that really drives people strategic wise in the game. The other thing that really people comment on is the design and the artwork on the cards. I have an artist that, does all of my artwork. He's out of Indonesia. I don't even know the guy's real name. But he's been working with me for probably like, I think I had an original artist and he kind of ghosted me after making 2 teams in a fictional. So I had
Oh.
to find somebody, and luckily this guy kind of fell into my lap. And I worked off of a site called Fiverr, which is like all freelance
Oh
work, and
yeah.
you can find, your artist or whatever. And, I created over time a relationship with this guy. And it turns out he was sending himself to school, off of the wages for the artwork that he was making for me. He eventually bought a car because, like $100 there is like, an entire week's worth of food, of meals.
Yeah.
So, at $5 a pop for artwork, he's making a pretty good sum. So I think the artwork that he creates, that he allows me to put on the card, is definitely, something that catches people's eyes the most. And again, like, John Wise, who recently got into my game, he's got, his Virginia Baseball League, fictional league that he just
Yeah.
created. And, it's the artwork that's allowing him to build personal connections with these cards, because he's not just looking at numbers. And we're about to roll into a very brand new thing for me, which is going to be a co-op league that we're putting
Oh,
together
okay.
online. And it's going to be 8 guys. I'm the commissioner. I'm not even running a team. I'm just going to make sure that, I can do whatever I can to support these guys that are playing it. But they're already creating uniforms, and like I see names of players popping up, and they're already telling me who they're going to draft in a rookie draft, and they're talking about this guy has a great card, but I don't like the looks of him, like stuff like that. Like it's crazy how much like just artwork can play into it. And then when you
Yeah.
get to the historical stuff, I mean, you're looking at the cards, and you're looking at Ted Williams on the card, you're looking at Joe DiMaggio on the card. I've been getting a lot of signatures back that I'm put into a new product called the
Oh,
Signature
right.
Series, and I have autographed cards in there, and they're blown up artwork pieces on a 5x8 card that you're getting with these packs, and I'm getting them back from players like Steve Nikosha, who is a backup catcher for the
Yeah. I remember
1979
him.
Pirates. The artwork on there is phenomenal. Like the artwork that this artist is giving me is just so incredible that like I'm so thankful that I was able to find this guy, and I'm thankful that he's able to benefit off of it, because he's basically, he's a full-time employee working for me, just creating artwork. And he went to art school. He sent himself through school, which is, fantastic. But the artwork is something that catches people's eyes. And I hear that and the fatigue system, to go back and get to the back of the beginning of the question. The artwork and the fatigue system are the two things that are probably brought up the most. Third would be the confrontation role. I think
Yeah.
because it is, in its essence, it's I guess you would say it's a modified 50-50 system, right? But
Yeah.
it's modified to the point where you know that either the batter or the pitcher is going to have the upper hand in the confrontation, what I call quote unquote confrontation role. So I think that's definitely a big part, but the fatigue system is something that really, because that is a 50-50 system modified, the confrontation, the fatigue system's so different than anything anybody has played in other games, that's probably what's brought up a lot.
Yeah, you said two things there. One, it triggered the memory for me that's kind of how I found your game originally, was you sharing like, hey, who's this guy? Right? Like,
Mm.
as you were
Oh, when
getting
I
the
was doing
artwork.
like the nickname stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like that was a lot of fun to like see those coming through on like social media feeds. But then as you've been talking too about like the built-in strategy with the game, like I realized like as a tabletop baseball player, for me, a lot of times I just go into full spectator mode, right? I just like want to roll, get the results, like kind of get through the games that way.
Yeah.
It's actually hard to do that with your game, because
Mm.
if you're just going to sit there and be a spectator, you're missing out on the key decisions that have to actually take place during the game. And
Yeah.
you actually need to be more involved, more engaged
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to sit down and play on deck baseball, because it's going to require you to be a part of the game a little bit more.
And I think the best part about that is that experience does not equate to a longer gameplay duration, right?
Right.
Because you're getting that experience, you're telling that story, but you're still able to complete the game, within a certain amount of time, which might even be less than other games that you're playing. So
Yeah.
I think, again, it goes back to, the balance between quality and pace,
Yeah.
right? Because you're diving yourself into the game, you're telling that story, but the quality is there with the pace of the game. And I think that was a very important aspect of it, because like I said, I didn't have all the time in the world, and I more or less was building this game for me. I wasn't building this game to release. Right.
Right.
So like for me and my friend Adam, when we were sitting down to play the game and we started creating it, we're restaurant managers. We're working 55 to 65 hours a week. We don't have a lot of time. We wanted to get it down, but at the same time, we didn't want to sacrifice that experience that you're having while you're playing the game. And you get sucked into it. You start learning these players, and especially with the historical stuff, like you're seeing Joe DiMaggio at the bat, like you're having all these, the We Are Family 1979 Pirates. I love bringing them up because I love their uniforms. I'm not really a Pirates fan, but I mean, they're a good team, especially with
They
Skeeny
are a good
Joe.
team.
But look, I mean, you're having those players in your hands, and you're watching these guys come up to the plate. And look, Dave Parker is intimidating, even on his card. Like the pose that we picked out for him and the artwork that was done for him, he's an intimidating beast at, in the box.
And
And
he
you're
should
rolling
feel
at,
that way, because
yeah,
that's what
exactly.
he
Like that's how
was.
you're supposed to feel. Like you're not just supposed to make it a chore, and you're not supposed to be just rolling dice just for the sake of rolling dice and getting results. Like I want you to have fun while you're playing a board game. Why else play it? Like what's the point?
Yeah. Agreed. Going back to the idea that like when you're releasing your sets with the 8 teams across the generations, do you feel like Like if I was to have a matchup of, Pedro Martinez against like Shoeless Joe Jackson, like, and I don't, whether they're in the game or not doesn't matter, but like, do you feel like both players are able to get to the numbers that you would want them to have? Will I still feel like Shoeless Joe is Shoeless Joe and Pedro gets to be Pedro even in that cross generational matchup?
Absolutely. And I think that is something that's very difficult to quantify because we don't
Mhm.
know how that interaction would happen. But I feel like you do know that Shoeless Joe probably has a better shot at getting a hit off of Pedro Martinez than Moonlight Graham does, right? I mean,
Right.
like you're getting this guy in the box. He's a hitter. He hits for a high on base percentage. He hits for a high batting average. He's going to have a better shot at getting a base hit than, your scrub from 1917 White Sox or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely think that even if you're playing cross era, and I do put in the instruction manual that there are ways that you can adjust the game. So I do have some Japanese teams in there from the Nippon League, and I have a lot of Negro League teams in there. So
Oh,
whether or
nice.
not you think that these guys are at the same level of the MLB, it's up to you. But you can adjust their ratings to be able to play that. So like if you want to come in and say that the pitchers aren't as good for whatever reason, and everybody has their own opinions, but for whatever reason you think that the pitchers aren't good for say the Japanese pitchers against the MLB pitchers, you can reduce one on each of their pitching ratings so the batters in the MLB have, a better advantage. And vice versa. You can decrease the ratings for the batters of the Japan teams against the major league pitchers. So you can make that adjustment not only
Mhm.
for like spanning, Japanese versus MLB, but you could also do cross era adjustments also. So it's all there so you can do that. But yeah, definitely if you have Joe Jackson in the box, you're going to know that you're playing with Joe Jackson. You're going to know you have Ty Cobb against Greg Maddux, which I think would be a fantastic matchup. If we could ever make that happen, let's make it happen. But that's that kind of stuff. It does play out, and I feel like you do know that you have these players in your hands when you're rolling the dice, regardless of the situation.
Very cool. Going to Digital Dice. I don't know if you've been to any of the other conventions, but at least at that one, like, what has been the biggest surprise to you in terms of the reaction to the game? Like, was it just like a shock to you that people were drawn to you in your game?
You know, the first time I went, their first con, I had no idea what to expect.
Yeah.
No idea, because I knew that I had a set following online, but I
Mhm.
also knew it was very difficult to get new people to try my game just because it is very different. So I really didn't have any clue going in there. I'm going to set up the table. I got my, nice shiny tablecloth because I do like to set myself out. Like I want people to be able to notice me. And I got the new, flag this year,
Yeah.
or the banner. I'm trying to get one thing every year.
Nice.
And no, I don't do any other cons. I wish I could, but I try to make it so I could just do one a year. I got, family stuff and everything like that. So I don't want to take myself away too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the very first year I want to say I was kind of intimidated by the community because I wasn't sure the reaction. Getting into, sitting down at a table and seeing all these guys who are, very dedicated to different games, whether or not they're going to give me a shot, what I can do, to bring them over to catch their eye, have them sit in front of me, because I know that once somebody plays my game, they're going to like it. They're going to be hooked and they're going to want to play it more. It was just a matter of getting people into the seat. And I think when I first got there, and people started finally coming over, it kind of snowballed,
Mhm.
and like the table just got busy, and then it didn't stop. And I appreciate everybody giving me their time, and I love talking to people. I love having people come down and try the game. It's one thing that I could talk about endlessly. Like we could be on this podcast until tomorrow morning talking about this if my wife will allow me. I doubt it. But it was that busyness that like kind of reaffirmed like, if I can get somebody in the seat, if they could try the game, they're going to like it. And that snowballed into this past year at the con. And again, very busy table, and it was fun because I was showing new people the game. I got new people hooked to the game. New people were walking away with sets. Uh, what else could you want? It was great. It was an amazing feeling just that people liked the game. And that I
Nice.
had that feeling when I first released it too, because I didn't know what to expect. And I was very new to the community when I was releasing the game for the first time. And when I put it up, I put I have a Weebly site, and you could put down like your inventory.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I didn't know what to put. I didn't know how many people were going to buy it. And then all of a sudden I had like 40 orders and I'm like, I have to print this out. Like, so it was like another feeling like that. And then going into the con again, like I know I had like that online community that was a dedicated community, but whether or not I could attract new people that were into other games. And, luckily enough, people got into the chair, and I think just word of mouth, more people got into the chair, and it just kind of snowballed from there. An
Yeah.
amazing feeling. Like really, it really is.
Well, I think, I know for me anyways, and I'm sure for a lot of folks who found your game even before Digital to Dice, like for me, it was Steve Tower, right? And Steve does this so often
Yeah.
with newer designers, right? Like him putting your game out on his table and showcasing it, and he does such a good job of showcasing the games.
He really
But
does. Yeah.
yeah, and yours was one of the ones that I just remember. I was like, okay, what's he got here? And like getting
Mhm.
a chance to just watch him like play through your game. It's like you can see the flow, you can see the quality of the cards and everything. So that was really probably a big lift for you early on too.
Yeah, and I got to say, like Steve has become a very good friend
Mm,
throughout this whole entire process. So I liked the fact that yeah, I didn't know this community existed. I didn't know all these games existed. But being able to come in here, it's not always about the game, but the connections that you make with people. And
yeah,
like just the friends and everything that I've made during this entire process has made the entire process worth it. Like, I don't make money on this game. Like, this is a hobby more than anything else. I'm not doing this for a business. My game is more costly than other games, and I realize that. But it's because of the production costs. It's because of the artwork. It's because of all these different things, and it's not getting any easier, let me tell you, with the cost of shipping and everything that's going up.
oh yeah,
But I make it work. And it's the fact that I can get into people's hands and they're enjoying the game. That's what makes it worth it to me. I'm not going to be able to buy a house off of this gig. Like it's not going to happen. This is not how I bought my car. I
right,
do this because I do it for the love of the game, for the love of baseball, for the love of the community that I know is out there, and for the people that are coming to my game and playing the game and enjoying it. And that does it for me. That's all I
yeah,
need.
nice, very cool. So, as a designer, is there things that you still want to explore with on deck baseball? I think you mentioned a couple of seasons that you are kind of toying around with the idea. Is there any other refinements or different modes that you might look at doing for like the future?
Yeah, there's been some stuff that I definitely want to add into both the historical and the fictional versions. One of those being ballpark effects. That is something that is on the list. I haven't had a whole lot of time to toy around with it, but I would like it because I know other games do put it in there, and I think it would be a fun feature to know that you're playing in, Candlestick with the wind or the Polo Grounds with the giant center field, and you're not going to hit a lot of home runs in there. I think that kind of stuff definitely would add to the game. So that's something I want to explore. I would like to also bring in uh, probably like, I don't want to say manager tendencies, but something to have to do with managers on the field. And maybe like with them having a little bit more control, like if you are managing your own team, like you're playing the 1961 Yankees, okay? You're playing through a season, but you have, the Red Sox come into town, and I don't know who their manager was, but maybe they have a manager card, and it dictates what they would do in a given situation for if you were going to the bullpen, because your pitcher gave up a lot of runs, something like that. Like I would like to play
Yeah.
around with that. And then umpires, I'd like to have umpire cards, and, I hate to say it, maybe ABS. I don't know. Like, do you want to put that in the game now? I don't want ghost runners. I'm not going that far. But like, it's a part of the game now. Is it something that you want to have, an option for people to have? And it's really funny because I only bring this up because it was never an idea in my head
Yeah.
until one of the guys who plays my game, Gary Smith, he was sitting down with some of his buddies and they came up with their own homebrew, and it was ABS. You got to strike out. You're calling the bluff on the umpire, you're rolling the dice, and you got to, you have to guess two numbers on the die. And if those two numbers come up, you won it. You won the
Oh,
challenge, and you only get to do that twice if you fail. So like, these are things that are like, the on deck community is really known for coming up with their own home brews. And some of them have found themselves coming into the game. There's a card that you can play off of, at the beginning of the games. And it's kind of like a fatigue chart, but for position players. So you could roll on it, and it basically forces your hand, especially in a fictional game, it forces your hand to get the subs in to get some at bat. So like if you roll and you have to go against the durability in a fictional game, and if you roll against the durability of say Peter Lucas, second baseman for the Gators, don't ask how I know that. I played my game a lot. And you have to take him out. You have to put in your substitute second baseman. So it forces your hand to do that. That
Yeah.
was a creation, or that was maybe not a creation, but an idea of somebody from the community. I didn't have that idea, but I played around with it and I got it to the point where, it was an essential part of the game, to where now if you're playing a full season in the fictional, you're rolling on this pregame fatigue chart to see if your starters are all going to start or if your catcher needs rest, all that kind of stuff. So it's fun to see, how different players play and then incorporate their own rules. And yeah, do I want to fine tune some stuff? Definitely. Do I want to play around with new mechanics? Sure. Whether or not everything makes it into the game, I don't know, but it's fun to be my own testing ground. And that's where I like it, that like I'm a developer that plays my own game. And I think that's very important because, I'm not going to put something out there that I know is not going to reach people or people are not going to like. So, and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said that, like, when I was in my 20s, I would buy like every year it was about 3 years in a row where I bought like a 10-pack of games for Shea to go see the Mets.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a Sunday pack, right? Like I got 10 Sunday home games that I would go and I would watch the games. And it was like during the Valentine era when Bobby was like,
Okay.
Valentine was managing the team, and he had a rule like Piazza sat at home games on Sundays. Like that was his like scheduled day off. He was just like, he's going to sit. So every time we would go to the game, it was like, well, we're not going to see Piazza today unless he pinch hits.
Man.
It wasn't great, but at the same time, it was like, you almost need like a boutique rating there to like capture that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Like,
And
hey,
that's kind of what that does. Yeah. I used to go to Shea a lot. My dad was a Mets fan,
okay.
and we actually had our own scalper. So we would go and we would find our guy Mike, and he would sell my dad tickets. And I think probably the reason I became a Yankee fan is because my dad was a Mets fan. I don't know why. It's just kind of like how it happens, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, Shea was a fun stadium to go to. So
It was a
cool that you
fun
brought that up.
stadium.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. In the end, like wrapping this up, when someone finishes a game of on deck baseball, like what is this baseball story that you hope that they kind of walk away and say that's what I just experienced?
I just want them to be able to experience their own narrative. I want them to, as they're playing the game, I don't want them to come in and feel like they maybe didn't reach their expectations, but I want them to come in not with expectations. Does that make sense? Like I want them to play their own game, but I also want them to be satisfied with the result, but I want them to build the narrative as they're playing. And that goes not just fictional, that goes with historical also, because I mean, when you have Bob Gibson on the mound, you expect Bob Gibson to be Bob Gibson, right? But at the same time, how is Bob Gibson going to be Bob Gibson? Right? Because if you're playing him against, the 1986 Mets, you've never seen that before. So I want a person who's playing on deck to be able to build that story, enjoy while they're doing it, feel the flow of the game and feel like you're on the field and walking away with that narrative. And I think that's a lot of these guys, a lot of people in my community, they have their own leagues, right? They have their own setups. Ray Price, he has the DBBL, and, Frank Burgo, he has the ODBFL, and Adam Anthony has the UBF, the United Baseball Federation. I think he's a big wrestling fan. John Wise has the Virginia Baseball League. Edward Thompson has the ABL. Like all these guys, they all have their own narrative. David James has his historical league that he's playing, so he has his own narrative. Frank Burgo has a giant 142 game or 142 team tournament going with all of the pro set teams. Like these guys, these people are playing the game. They're building their own stories and they're doing it over the course of the long haul. Like it's not just individual games, but they're capturing their own attention for a lengthy period of time playing on deck. And my only hope, my aspiration for this game is that they're walking away after rolling the dice, feeling an experience and feeling a narrative and a story that they just built and wanting to come back, experience again and build on that. And that's what I'm hoping is happening.
Well, and I think that one of the things your game does, from having played a number of games myself, is because I think most baseball games that are out there, because of the fact that we are playing every at bat and everything like that, like we do get we get that unique storyline that every game offers, right? You hear it all the time, like, man, that never happened before in a baseball game. And it's like, even after 150 years of playing baseball, you still get those moments where it's like, that's never happened before in a baseball game. But the fact that you have like those confrontation moments almost creates those pivotal moments, those kind of like, highlight moments that you could almost capture and see like, that's the one that would have made the ESPN top 10 tonight, and I think that part we don't get from every single game. So I think you did a really nice job of like getting that built in where it's not just the pitcher batter, but those other pivotal moments that really come out and shine in their own way throughout that narrative of that game.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that was definitely a goal, was to bring you onto the field, experience those moments, having, individual players give you results in the field and not just feeling like you're rolling dice for results. Like that was a big part of it. Definitely.
Very good. All right, Ian, appreciate your time, and hope that people will go out. Let's talk about where they can go out and find your game.
So I have a website, on-deckbaseball.com. You can check it out there. It's my very first attempt at building a website. So there are tabs at the top. You have to navigate that a little bit. If there's any questions, you could always send me an email. It's on_deckbaseball at yahoo.com. And, contact me through Facebook, contact me anywhere you see On Deck Baseball. I answer all questions. I'm really good. I hope to be really good about getting back to people. But yeah, I mean, it's just come out, try the game. It's, it's an experience. I hope people enjoy it. People have enjoyed it, and I'm hoping to build on that.
Very cool. And I'll include the links in the show notes as well, so people can get access to those from there. So
great.
Appreciate it, Ian. Really enjoyed the conversation, talking about the game, and it was a good catching up.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on. It was a lot of fun.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this week's episode. First and foremost, let me thank Ian Brooke for taking some time out of his schedule to sit down and talk about On Deck Baseball. Great game. I really enjoyed being able to just hear his thoughts on the design process and the idea that he really wanted to see more of the action that takes place outside that pitcher-batter interaction. And while I think he also really came up with a really cool mechanic in terms of the whole confrontation ratings, I think it's really cool to be able to get into the game and feel like you get to see the development of things like double plays, that ball hitting the gap, and create those kind of pivotal moments throughout a game. So if you haven't had a chance to check out On Deck Baseball, we're going to put some links into the show notes so that you can go ahead and try that out. Price point for the game is a little higher than most, but keep in mind that you're dealing with much larger playing cards, and those cards are bigger, as he mentioned, to put all of the charts on the batter card, on the pitcher card, so that you're not having to look all over the place for different charts. Your footprint, it's your pitcher card and your batter card for the most part. The artwork on it is pretty cool, so I think he's done a really nice job doing that as well and adding something unique to his cards. And for all those reasons, yeah, you might pay a little bit more. Understand that the costs of things like paper and shipping and all that, that's what's driving this hobby a little bit right now. So, we have to pay a little bit more when we want to deal with quality. All that being said, I've been enjoying some of the great teams that I have with the set. I wasn't aware about the fictional, so that's something I might have to go check out in the near future as well. All right, next week, we're coming going back-to-back interviews, and we're going to have a special Father's Day episode, and I'll be talking with one of the members of our community, Roy Paith. So we're going to have that interview next week, and it being on Father's Day, you just know that there's going to be some sort of theme around our interview to deal with that special day for all of us. Until then, thanks for listening.